As mom, I am my own person, and I began to see that it was really healthy for my kids to see me model this. And so by doing this thing that is life-giving and taps into my strengths and my giftings and moves us towards our goals, they're seeing that you don't have to be defined by a role. You can be who you are and fill a role, but you don't have to be limited by what that role is.
Welcome to the Carla Rand Show, a weekly podcast designed to dig into the lives of everyday people. People who are making a positive impact, people who have risen above and overcome obstacles. Insights and stories from ordinary individuals who inspire us all towards the truly extraordinary. Here's your host.
Hey, it's Carla, and I got to talk to Jennifer Uren, and she is very similar to me. I connected with her, and it was actually a real blessing. So she's got a large family. She talks actually about adoption. So she had 3 kids, and she adopted 2 more, basically all at once. She talks also about some of the walls that she hit in her life, how she had a lot of struggles and challenges that she had to overcome. And then she just shared her message with the world, which is really simple but super powerful. So let's get into this conversation. I know you're going to really get a lot out of it. Okay, I have Jennifer Uren on here with me, and Jennifer and I connected through Facebook. Surprise, surprise. And Jen is actually, she has a home-based business. She's a mother of 5, and she also has a podcast, which is really cool. And the podcast is called This Mom Knows, which I really love the title of that. So Jennifer, welcome to the Carla Rand Show. Super happy to have you here today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Can you tell me a little bit more about sort of your business and your podcast? Like why is it called This Mom Knows?
Yeah. So one of the things that I've discovered in just being a mom is that there's so many things that I have to know about. And I don't always know every day what it is I'm going to need, am I going to need to know about ER visits today or whatever? And it's overwhelming to go, I sometimes I felt like a jack of all trades and a master of none. And once I began to realize that, as moms collectively, we have it all covered. Somebody knows what I need to know, either experientially, like they can understand what I'm going through, or they actually know the skill that I need to ask questions about. And I'm a connector by nature. It just started to make sense that I would have these conversations and say, okay, well, what do I know as a mom? What do you know as a mom? Because somewhere there's a mom who knows, and we can learn from each other.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And really, that's kind of the premise of this podcast, too, is learning from other people. So today we're going to learn from you, learn from your story, and you're going to have, just an opportunity to share with us. So why don't we start, Jen, well, first of all, just say that I got to know you because your business model actually appeals to somebody like me. So your business model for your home-based business is to help busy moms of large families to be able to kind of structure and have some kind of flexible routines in their life. And I'm like, that's me, right? So that really appealed to me. And then we kind of got chatting about that. So it was wonderful. And it was really a blessing for me to be able to talk to you about that. So thank you for giving me that space. But let's get to know you a bit more. So tell us about yourself. Like, where did you grow up? Kind of about your school, your family, stuff like that.
Sure. So I grew up in Minnesota. And I know you're further north. We always refer to ourselves as the frozen chosen, but you guys are much colder than us.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I'm the oldest of 3 kids, and my dad was a pastor of a church in South Minneapolis. And what was really kind of unique is a lot of pastors' families move every 3 to 5 years, and we didn't. We were in the same church for 13 years, and my parents have actually been in the same house now for going on 40 years. So, so that's a different experience than a lot of pastors' kids have had. Mm-hmm. But I grew up with a travel bug. I loved traveling. I loved taking pictures. To me, my best souvenirs on a trip were the pictures that I took and the memories it kept. I went to a private Christian high school. I was really blessed that I was able to do that. And then I went on to a small Christian college in the Chicago area. And I met my husband during those years. We got married and we have stayed. So I came to Chicago for 4 years, and I've been here for a little over 30. So the best laid plans.
Well, we have even more in common than I thought, because I actually went to a small Christian school my whole life. Between that and homeschooling, I was kind of doing a little bit of both,
Okay.
kind of in and out. And so, yeah, I graduated from a Christian school, and then I went to a small Christian college as well. And yeah, same kind of thing. And I met my husband there. Oh my goodness, right?
That's so fun. Yeah.
That's cool. So what was school like for you? I'm just curious, like, were you a real, high achiever? Did you struggle in school? What was that experience like for you?
Yeah. What's interesting is things came relatively easy for me. And so I sort of had this idea that if I had to work hard at it, there was a problem. And so as I got into college, I did great in high school. But once I got to college, my grades really plummeted because I didn't actually have study skills or understand what to do or how to approach learning. I just was supposed to already be good at it. And so that was a challenge. So I've had to unlearn those things as an adult and learn how to teach my kids to learn and not just to study for a test or get a grade. But I was social. I am not athletic. I've been trying to get out of gym class ever since kindergarten. But I desperately wanted a letter jacket in high school. And in my school, the only way you could get one was through sports. And so I became the team manager for the boys soccer team, for the hockey team, for the track team. And I lettered 7 times in sports and never broke a sweat.
Oh, wow. Very good. Good for you. That's awesome. And I probably really sharpened a lot of those skills for you too, right? Just some of that management and organizational type of skills. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so that was fun.
Yeah. So tell me, how come you have 5 kids? Because we talked about this.
Well,
yeah, I know there's a bit of a story there. Can you give us a bit of an idea? Like, how did this all happen?
Yeah. So the funny thing is, growing up as a kid, if you asked me how many kids did I want, I always said 5. I don't know why. I mean, I had no experience with 5 kids, but 5 sounded good. And so we got married. We had 2 children. And they were both really hard pregnancies. And then we got pregnant with our 3rd, and this pregnancy was a breeze. And so I was relieved and excited. And then I miscarried at 17 weeks. Oh. And the doctor said, now we know hard pregnancies mean healthy babies. And so we had decided that we were done. We were going to just be content with our 2 because I could not imagine going through that again. And then we had a surprise 3rd child, another pregnancy. And it was by far the worst. And the doctor said, you're going to have to take steps to make sure you don't have any more kids because someone will not survive the next go round. And it could be me that time. So we said, we're done at 3. And so we're raising our 3 kids. We are starting to get a taste of independence. We're out of diapers where everyone can feed themselves. They can bathe on their own. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, God plopped 2 babies into our laps. And it is the most backwards, fastest adoption story you'll ever hear. One day I had 3 kids. 2 weeks later, I had 5. And 6 months later, the adoption was completely finalized. And so when people come up to me and say, hey, we're thinking of adopting, can I talk to you? I'm like, oh, you can talk to me, but I don't know a thing about adoption because we didn't do anything conventionally. But suddenly, now I have my 5 kids.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about how that happened? Like, how come the adoption went so fast?
Yeah. So the short answer is because God was completely behind all of it. But I was in a homeschool co-op. And as I was leaving the co-op one day, my friend tracked me down, and I'm a connector. I know people, and I'm always connecting solutions to problems. And she's like, Jen, I know you know somebody who's looking to adopt, and I just found out about a little boy, and if he doesn't get a placement within the next week, he's going into foster care. And so I had this I call it a holy moment, just this warm chill went down my back, and I went, we found this boy a family. I just knew we had. And so I called my friend and I said, hey, this is the story. And for a whole variety of legitimate reasons, because she was working through an adoption agency and a bunch of other things, she had to say no. And that just overwhelmed me because I thought, I know we found this boy a family. And so my husband calls me on his way home from work. Hey, I'm coming home. How was your day? And I'm like, well, you're not going to believe it. Da-da-da-da-da-da. And he goes, what about us? So, what do you mean, what about us? He's like, well, what about us? Could we adopt him? I don't know. So I called my friend and she's like, are you serious? I'm like, apparently. So yes, it was a private placement. There was no state or government organization involved other than to say that going home to biological family was not an option. And so the biological parents were trying to come up with the best solution for this situation. And so we said, well, let's go till God closes a door. And then the next day, the first phone call is, there's a sister. There's two of them. And my husband's like, well, we're not separating them. Mm-hmm. And it is such a long shot. We'll just go till God closes the door, but don't get attached. And 2 weeks later, we met with the parents and they signed guardianship papers. They moved in with us. And just like that, we had 2 more children. And actually, we gained a whole lot more because our family probably tripled in size because we have biological parents, we have biological grandparents, we have caregivers that were in their lives. Like suddenly now our extended family has just mushroomed into all these people.
Wow. So how was that? Like, how did you manage all that? Because that would have been just a lot all at once, right? Like, I think of it maybe similar to having like twins or triplets, but even more so because now these kids are already older. They already have their own experiences, right? Like, how did that go? Yes. Like, was it a really easy transition or was it a little choppy?
Yeah, it was really hard. Up to that point, the year before this, I had been just sort of buried under overwhelm with a whole bunch of stuff. I kind of had described myself as stress paralyzed. I didn't know where to start, what to do. And I just sort of found myself floating through my days instead of accomplishing much. And all that time I kept kind of feeling like I was supposed to be getting caught up, but I was like, I've got years, I'll wait till the kids are in school. And so I really squandered this opportunity to be ready. And then the kids joined our family. And so I was already overwhelmed with life when they joined us, but we knew it was the right thing. So we kept going, but it was hard. They're 9 months apart. We were, for both of them, the 4th home they had lived in their short little lives. They didn't know us. We were perfect strangers. They had not yet been in a home together. So even though they're full siblings, this was the first, they had been only children to a certain extent, and now they're one of 5. We didn't know, we'd had no training. So we're trying to figure out, how do you deal with these huge behaviors, these big emotions, these hour-long, I call them temper tantrums, but I mean, really it was, a 17-month-old saying, I don't know who you are and my people are gone and this is not where I belong. And he can only do it through screaming and kicking and biting. And we were not prepared for any of this stuff. And tangentially, we were not in good health. My husband and I were both very obese. He was morbidly obese. And this sort of kicked us off on a thing of going, hey, if we're going to be around for these kids when we're older, we've got to get our health in order. And so it was just a lot of things that this was the catalyst to changing in our lives. So it was probably one of the hardest things we have gone through in our entire marriage. And yet it's probably one of the richest and most abundantly full of blessing things that we've done too.
Yeah. I didn't realize that you had been, obese. How did you, I'm curious, because of course I'm a fitness and nutrition coach. How did you get to that point where you could lose the weight, where you could get into a healthy place?
Yeah. Well, it really started with my husband because he was sitting there just depleted of energy. And he began to think, I'm not going to be around. He was our 9-month-old at the time. I'm not going to be around for your wedding. I might not be around for your graduation. And then he went, I wonder if I'll be there for our oldest. And he just began to realize something had to change. And he ended up finding a program called Bright Line Eating. But Bright Line Eating leads with food behavior. And so my husband really struggles more with food addiction. I don't struggle with food addiction. I can be working and task oriented and I can forget to eat for the whole day. So that's not my problem, but that's not healthy either.
Right.
So we both were coming at this from opposite ends of the spectrum, but Bright Line Eating basically was no sugar, no flour, but we can have grains, whole grains. We eat 3 meals a day, no snacks, and we weigh and measure. And so suddenly we were just increasing our fruits and vegetables amazingly, like from 0 to a lot, and limiting our protein and eliminating just about anything that was processed. And so it all started with food and behavior and not with exercise. And my husband lost over 100 pounds within the first year. I lost 50. And it just has transformed our health. And so now I can add in exercise. I have the energy for it. And these other things are coming. But for us, it was what we needed because it addressed. I ate more food than ever. He ate less food, but the better food, healthier food. And so that's basically how we did it.
Good. Yeah. No, I'd like to say a lot about that, but we're not here to just talk about fitness and nutrition. But
right.
But I will say, I think the reason that diets tend to work is because, like, whatever kind of diet it is, typically, not with everyone, but most of them, you get your portions dialed in and you're really just eating good, healthy food and you cut out all the other junk. So you know what I mean? But the interesting thing is it sounds like it continues to work for you guys today. It wasn't like you just lost a bunch of weight in 3 to 6 months and then you just gained it all back. So whatever you were doing was clearly pretty sustainable. Are you still eating exactly the same way or are you eating with those general principles, but you're still kind of doing more of your own thing now?
Yeah, we became a little lax over COVID because we moved during there and different things, but we saw that it made a difference. And so we've tightened back in on them. But I've said, instead of working off of recipes, I now have a meal template. It's made my life so much easier because I can think, oh, yes, we need the fruit, the veggie, the protein, and I can throw together a meal without needing a recipe. So yes, it was a lifestyle change as opposed to a restrictive diet. And, but yes, so it's been freeing for us, really.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much because I like my clients or like a lot of my followers, they want meal plans. And what I say is meal plans are a starting point if you really don't know what to eat, but you need to get to the point where you don't need a meal plan, where you can just say, like, you can just have a general idea. Like, I would eat some fruits, some veggies, and some protein. And you figure that out and you just build meals around that, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and even snacks. Like, you can just incorporate it because you know generally what you're supposed to eat. And again, like minimally processed foods and amazing. So we'll maybe talk more about that another time.
I was gonna say it's like learning to diagram a sentence. You only have to do that until you understand, and then you just do it. You don't think about the structure anymore. So
that's such a good point. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, like, how has God then, because God is an important part of your journey, you've brought that up. How has God guided you through, the difficult times with this adoption and the difficult times with you when you talked about you hitting a wall? Can you kind of get more into that? You said before the adoption even, you were really not in a good place. What was going on there? And then how did you get out of that?
Yeah, I think that a lot of my life, I was a pastor's kid. And so I grew up in the fishbowl, people watched. And I think that a lot of my life was really this idea that I was seeking this affirmation and approval externally. And so part of that meant I couldn't let people down. And if you're not going to let somebody down, you're saying yes all the time. And in order to say yes all the time, that means that you have no limits. And I kind of bought into this lie that I could do anything and everything. And if I said no, then I was either something was wrong with me, I was letting somebody down, or it meant that I was going to miss out on something. And so I just kept saying yes and yes and yes. And what I came to realize was that by saying yes to everything, I was actually letting everybody down because I did nothing well. I couldn't juggle it all. And so as I've, worked through all of this overwhelm where I found myself and returned to a life that has a balance of rest and joy and work and relationship, I think what I saw was just that God was faithful. He was faithful to teach me these things. He was faithful to encourage me. And he's been faithful to take these hard things and redeem them by turning them into such a beautiful part of our story.
Yeah. So how did you get then from that feeling of overwhelm to learning to say no? Like,
Yeah.
because you say no, because I tell you, for me, I say no to most things. There's,
Okay.
like when I say yes to something, I say yes and I go all in, but I say no to
Yeah.
a lot of things. Um, and I've had to do that kind of for my own sanity too. But like, how did
Yes.
you get
Yes.
to the point where you could say no without feeling like you were letting people down? Was it just like, was it sort of like, oh my goodness, I just suddenly felt this? Or was it just like, I'm going to die if I don't?
Yeah, it was kind of a blend. I mean, I realized something had to change, right? But I think it was really going through this process. And when I say process, it wasn't formal. It was just when I look back, I can see that these things sort of played out. But it was this process of going, what are my priorities? What has God called me to? And then filtering things through it and saying, does this fit? And so it meant, and it took a couple years because I was in some pretty major commitments, but it took a couple years to sort of go, I need to, um, I called it unencumber. I need to get out of these things that I had said yes to, and I can't just quit because that's not responsible. So I
Mhm.
need to have an exit plan. I need to have a handoff process. And um or I need to delegate it to someone. And so it became a revamping of how chores worked. What can only I do and what can my kids do? That when they leave, I'll have to pick up again. But for now, I pay the bills. My kids can't pay our bills, but they can sure do the dishes.
Right.
It was just sort of this whole process of redefining and coming up with that grid to say, okay, does this fit? So that instead of just throwing all the good things on my plate, I was saving room for the great things.
Mhm.
And it took time. It was not overnight in its application, but it was pretty overnight in the realization that I needed it.
Yeah. So, like, it sounds like that journey is kind of what brought you. I'm guessing, did that sort of bring you to your home based business? Like, why are you doing a home business? Why don't you just go work
Yeah.
out, or, you know what I mean? Because you're homeschooling your kids
Right.
too. You're homeschooling 5 kids.
Yes.
You're trying to run a
Yeah.
business. Like, what's that all about? Can you tell us?
Yeah. Well, part of it is looking ahead. I mean, we started dreaming again and going, what do we want to do? And our dream is to buy an RV and travel North America and see everything
Mm.
with the kids. And in order to do that, there's some things you need. You can't, so we had to continue to unencumber. We sold our house last year and we're renting a friend's house at the moment until we're ready to go. But we recognize that even from a financial standpoint, like if I could start a business and it could meet a certain amount of needs, then we're not tied to a location. If I can do something that I can do from anywhere. So we didn't want to just go get a job. We wanted to build something so that we could create space for travel and doing these things that we wanted to do. But the other part of it was, struggling with this identity, of always trying to be who other people expected me to be. As a mom, I felt like that was what defined me, was that role. And I've learned, actually, I'm a person. As mom, I am my own person. And I began to see that it was really healthy for my kids to see me model this. And so by doing this thing that is life-giving and taps into my strengths and my giftings and moves us towards our goals, they're seeing that you don't have to be defined by a role. You can be who you are and fill a role, but you don't have to be limited by what that role is.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, I'm learning. I'm learning that. Like, yeah, it's like, yeah, I'm going to be 40 this year, and I'm just discovering myself. Like,
I
what's
know.
up with
Well,
that?
you're about 10 years earlier than me, so good good job.
Okay. Okay. So what exactly then? So you could do everything, all of this from home. You would be working with
Yes.
people like me, right? Like people that are
Yes.
entrepreneurs. They have big families. They've got lots going on, and they need maybe some structures and systems in their life. So
Yeah.
what kind of person? Like, how would you help me? What would be the
Yeah.
first thing?
So I've always done this my whole life, for myself, and then I started doing it for my family, and then other people started to notice. But I'm always, I say it's because I'm lazy, but I want to do things the most efficient, simplest way possible. And so I will I will figure out what is the system and the process so that it can happen. I call it automatically. Obviously, there's some work involved, but I want to get things so that they become very routine. Because when something is routine, it gives us sort of the scaffolding on which to hang everything else. And then when things are great, we can flex and go, hey, yeah, we can go spontaneously do this fun thing. But then when we're hit with the unexpected, we actually have these support pillars in place that give us the ability to take what's coming and not have everything else crumble. And so as people have asked about that, that's sort of where this has come from. And so I in particular want to help the entrepreneurial mom with a large family. And I want to encourage her to know that with flexible routines, she can build this home life that is going to help her have the balance to grow a business and still be this successful mom. And really the analogy I use a lot of times, because it seems like it's a lot of work to go, I got to implement a system. And it's easy to choose the path of least resistance. But I compare it to like weeding the garden every day or getting in and pulling out that root system. It takes a lot more work to get in there and dig out those roots, but over time, it is going to save you a lot of effort and headache because you're not doing the same symptomatic things every day. Mm-hmm. And so by helping this mom get the right systems and routines and whatever into place, she can spend a whole lot more time enjoying the flowers and a whole lot less time weeding the garden.
Right. And I love that you're doing this because I've tried to get structure and system in my life and I'm not amazing at it. But I think when I start talking to people, I'm like, I'm actually not bad. Like I've kind of figured this out for the most part. I have some flexible routines, but a lot of people that I've gone to that have talked to me have been these, and I like nothing against single men. They're great. Right. But there's these single men, they don't have a wife, they don't have kids, but they have all these structures and systems and they kind of have like all the answers of like being a successful, productive person. And that really sounds good, but they don't always account for, the urgency of having little kids in your home or, like we live on a farm, right? So the urgency of cows calving or, or the weather or gardening or like all those other things that we're supposed to do or driving kids to and from events and things like that. So, it's nice somebody like you doing it. It's like there's someone that's actually in the trenches teaching it, not someone that maybe has more of an idealistic setting for structure. So I like the idea too that you're saying flexible routines, because if they're not flexible, I'm out of here. There's no way they're going to work for me, so.
Yeah. Well, they won't work for anyone because part of the flexibility is today's going to look different than tomorrow's going to look. And so they have to give a little, but the other flexibility is, it's just like our kids outgrow their clothes and we're always changing out their drawers. Sometimes we have to go, we've outgrown this routine, but not the whole thing, just this piece of it. So if we can change this piece of it, now it works again for us. Totally. And, so they kind of grow with us. But I totally agree with you on I listened to a book where he talked about, so I forget the whole purpose, but he's like, just pick the one thing you're going to do that day. And I'm like, one thing? I can pick one thing in 12 categories, but there's not one thing. What are you talking about?
Yeah, I know. It's a different thing. And I think too, like as a mompreneur or a mom entrepreneur or a mom businesswoman or work from home or whatever you want to say, you're right. We have different categories. We have the household. Like we need to keep the house reasonably clean. We need to make meals. We also have kids that need our attention. We also have a husband that needs our attention and possibly yard work and possibly animals, and then plus the business, right? So we need to be very
and logistics productive. Of all of those things. Oh, if you go here, then that means the car is gone, which means this, and it's these mental gymnastics that we're good at. We just do it, but it takes brain power and energy, and we have to somehow account for that in everything.
That's a really good point. I never really thought of that, but that's because some days I'm just like, I have no more mental capacity for anything. Like, just leave me alone. And I'm like, why? And it's because of that. And actually my husband, when he's trying to figure out like, okay, we got to drive this kid to here and then I got to pick up this and then we got this going on. And he always asks me because he's like, Carla, how do you think we can do this? And I think that I am just maybe because of the woman brain, right? Like I think I'm just wired to be able to figure that stuff out better. And I think typically women just tend to be able to figure that out more automatically than men maybe. So that's a gifting. But okay, I want to ask you, Jennifer, what is your message to the world? Okay. And we're going to kind of close with this big question. I know it's a huge question, but if you could just pick one or two things to tell our audience, to tell our listeners, what would you tell them? What's your message?
Yeah, I think my message would be, do the hard work over choosing the path of least resistance, because in the long run, that is really what is going to give you the freedom to move forward. And I think sometimes we confuse simple with easy, and we want what's easy, but what's simple often takes a little bit of work to get there. So really, it's do the work and reap the reward. Don't just be tied to the easy thing.
Totally. Yeah, and it's interesting. I was actually reading Proverbs this morning, and I wish I could remember the exact verse. I think it was in Proverbs 1:17, and it basically said that hard work brings profit, but the talk of fools, you come up empty, essentially, right? So you can talk about all the things that you want to do, and I'm sure we've all had that. People are like, "Oh, I'm going to start riding my bike every day. I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to run a business. I'm going to be the best mom ever." And they talk about all the things that they're going to do, but they don't put in the work to actually make it happen. And so I think that's
right.
that was in my head already. So when you said that, I'm like, yes, that's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, that's neat.
Just the hard work. And actually, another thing I did this morning, I'm trying to do it to help me focus, is I had a little bit of coffee, which I never usually have. And I find that when I have a task that's going to require a lot of focus, I can drink the coffee, and then all of a sudden I can actually sit for, maybe half an hour straight, which is kind of a stretch for me, and actually focus on one task, especially if it comes to reading or trying to figure out technology. I have such a hard time with that. So, but I have to do that hard work. I have to just sit there and get it done, because if I keep jumping from thing to thing, I'll never accomplish it, which means it'll never get done, which means I won't be able to move forward. So yeah, I love that message. Yeah.
Which leads to frustration. That's really interesting on the coffee, because when my son was in about 4th grade, I started giving him a cup of coffee every morning, because that calmed him enough to sit and do school. And so it's interesting how coffee impacts us differently. For some, we focus, and for some, it throws us off. But
I think I was feeling jittery, so I probably could have gotten kind of crazy, but I was like, no, it's just allowing me to focus. So maybe it just depends on how your brain is wired, right? So
yeah. The coffee's your anchor to say, now it's time to sit, and it's that trigger,
That's right. Yeah. And there's also some music. Sometimes I'll listen to certain classical music, and sometimes that kind of helps too. So maybe if I do the coffee and the classical music, I'll be unstoppable. I don't know.
That's right. Yeah. Watch out, world.
Watch out, world. Carla's got the coffee and the classics, and we're ready to rock. So Jennifer, thank you for sharing this. Where would people go to find you if they wanted to learn more about either your business or just you as a person? Where's the best place?
Yeah. Well, I've been in a rebranding, so I'm still building out my website, but you can always find me at thismomknows.com. And that's where you can also find all the links to the podcast and anything there as well. You can find me on Facebook at This Mom Knows, or on Instagram at This Mom Knows Podcast.
Nice. Okay. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I really enjoyed this conversation. It's really fun to talk to another mom, and and we have so many similarities. So I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me.
This episode is brought to you by my company, Power Fitness Online. We are a tight-knit fitness community, and we guide you every step of the way to get fit and stay fit through our live workouts, nutrition coaching, and incredible support team. Go to powerfitnessedson.com to learn more. Thank you for tuning into the podcast today. If you enjoyed it, please leave a positive review on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Music, or wherever you're listening. And if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, I would love to see your comments. I would love to know what you think about this episode and interact with you. I love hearing from you. Once again, I'm Carla Rand, and this is The Carla Rand Show, and I can't wait to see you next week for our next episode.